Star newspaper, Musalia reads Raila Taff goes for MPs, but Agadez moves seen as part of consolidating the Western vote for future. The stories on page 4 and 5. Education CS Mashogo stops school bus buying crates by head teachers. The stories on page 6. Another giant bites the dust as Japan see off Germany at a World Cup. All right. So we apologize for that. I've been told we're having a problem. All right, we apologize for that. There's a problem with my audio technology. So sorry. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. The show is Good Morning Africa. And let's just get on with the headlines this morning. The Star newspaper, Musalia raids Raila Taff goes for members of parliament. Whatever this move seen as part of consolidating the Western vote for the future, the stories on page 4 and 5. Education CS Mashogo stops school bus buying craze by head teachers. That is on page 6. Another giant bites the dust as Japan see off Germany at World Cup. The story is on page 32. The Standard newspaper, Inside Ruto teams radical CBC options. The Presidential Working Party on Education Reforms is considering radical changes that could alter the 2633 competency-based curriculum to a new 26243, which could see grade 6 learners remain in their present schools for another 2 years to ease transition challenges and address parents' age concerns. That's not such a bad idea. The story is on page 3, and of course the proposals under the consideration outlined here. Let me just go through them very quickly because I believe this is very important. So the education system from 2633 to a new one of 26243, and then grade 6 to remain in present schools for 2 years, and also another proposal is possible introduction of separate school uniforms for junior secondary. Okay, and then junior secondary to be taught high school content. And then discussion underway on teacher utilization for junior secondary, and then pre-primary and nursery school to take 2 years, age between 5 and 6 years. So pre-primary and nursery school to take 2 years, not what we have right now, 3 years. And it bothers me very early in the morning. You see very young kids waiting for school buses as young as, others are not even 3 years old, but usually a lot of them are from 3 years old. So this is not such a bad proposal. I think when I was attending the preschool, that is the age we were starting our, our preschool. That is not such a bad proposal, I think. Primary school to take 6 years, children between ages 7 and 12, of course, as I have explained there in some of the proposals up there. Okay, I will be interested to see the final, the final proposals once they're done, the final consideration. Anyway, Cherera 4 in fight of their lives. 4 IEBC commissioners who dissented with the chair and 2 other commissioners in the August polls, battling for survival as House hearings for their removal started yesterday. Vice Chairperson Juliana Cherera headed to court to seek more time to reply to the House petitions. That story is on page 7. Mudavadi stamps authority as senior most Western leader. Look at that. That story is on page 4. Maize, Ruto allies split on plan to impeach Korea. Again, I said it yesterday and I'm repeating it today. Why do you want to impeach Korea? You want to impeach the wrong person. Korea is just implementing policies by the government. So, MP calls for probe into 17 billion Kenya shillings payout. That story is on page 8. Another big upset as Japan stops Germany. That is on the sport page on page 48. And the Daily Nation, Kenya stares at athletics ban. The government last night declared zero tolerance to doping, with top sports officials racing against time to wriggle the country out of a looming ban against its athletes in international competitions over the rising cases of doping. Stories on page 2 and 3 this morning. And then ministry recalls HIV drag from patients. That is on page 16. Broke Treasury starts short-term debt swap. That is on the back page. And children quit school to search for food. School feeding programs in Turkana are helping to keep learners in class, but when the food runs out, the pupils also scatter. Unfortunately, that is the story of so many kids and schools in especially these hardship areas and rural areas, and even in the cities. I think tough times for a lot of families. That story is on page 12. Ruto Raila showdown in battle for IEBC, so that you'll find on page 4. So that is what we have on the leading newspapers here in Kenya. Let's look at some regional papers. We start with the Herald from Zimbabwe. Economic stability anchor of elections. We'll remind you that Zimbabwe is gearing up to its elections next year, and there has been a beehive of activities as far as that is concerned. The Daily News also from Zimbabwe. Unity, peace will spur our advance. Okay. And we have also the Daily News from Egypt. Al-Sisi follows up on efforts to manage and develop the Endowments Authority assets. And okay, Egypt, Greece sign MOU in field of air and sea search rescue. Very well. The Namibian, from Namibia obviously. A champagne flows as Von Francois falls. That was a leading figure when Germany was colonizing Namibia, and he was one of the leading figures of the colonialists. I'm shocked that his image or whatever it is was still in, in somewhere there in Namibia. And I think I have that in a detailed news bulletin just in a short while. Congress will be fair, new election chief. All right. And then the Sun, also from Namibia, Congress divisions threaten SWAPO in 2024. The new vision from, this is from Uganda, Auditor General exposes rot in COVID-19 deals. That is what we have. The Citizen from Tanzania. Bukoba reports we need to act now, say expert. And the Punch from Nigeria, governors stop deductions, consultants head for French court. And the Nation, also from Nigeria, electricity crisis, governors reject sale of 10 power plants. And that is what we have in some of those regional newspapers. So now let's just turn our attention to a detailed news coverage this morning. You are now up to date. We start, of course, with this developing story from Congo, and I will not get too much into it because I think it will make for our topic of discussion at around 11 a.m. East African time, just about 50 minutes away. And so the latest from this crisis, African leaders have declared a cessation of hostilities to start on Friday in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, where M23 rebels have been making substantial gains in recent months. The statement was signed at the end of mini-summit in Angola's capital, Luanda, attended by the Rwandan Foreign Minister and the President of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Angola and Burundi. The signatories agreed an East African regional force would attack M23 positions if the rebels did not withdraw immediately from occupied areas. There has been no word so far from M23. Democratic Republic of Congo accuses Rwanda of backing the rebels who have been advancing on the regional capital Goma, and Rwanda denies involvement. The Luanda summit saw leaders from the DR Congo and Rwanda meeting for the first time following a diplomatic fallout sparked by the raging conflict in the mineral-rich region. A row over a new electoral system in Sierra Leone has prompted a brawl in parliament. Video footage showing punches being exchanged amid a ruckus shouting appeared yesterday. A huge object, apparently the parliamentary maze, was seen hurled from one side of the chamber to the other and then back. A journalist said security then threw out some members of parliament. Members from the governing and opposition parties were pitted against each other over a plan to bring in proportional representation for next year's local and general elections. The proposals from the Electoral Commission require parliamentary approval. Okay. And then the shortlist for the 2023 African Prize for Engineering Innovation has been announced, featuring 15 entrepreneurs and their pioneer technologies from around the continent. The prize, founded by the Royal Academy Engineering, is worth $30,000 and is awarded for the best engineering solutions that address the continent's challenges. Some of the selected innovations include a remote healthcare monitoring system, improving rural healthcare, a low-energy, low-pollution cooking stove, and accessible electric mobility solutions. The 2023 prize aims to tackle challenges central to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, including clean water and sanitation, sustainable cities and communities, good health and well-being, and quality education. Entrepreneurs from 10 African countries have made the cut, including, for the first time, Angola and Sierra Leone. 4 finalists will be chosen to pitch their innovations and business plans to Africa Prize judges at an event in Accra, Ghana on the 6th of July 2023, and an additional One to Watch award of £6,000 will be given to the most promising entrepreneur from the remaining shortlist. The rise in vaccine-preventable disease such as measles and polio in African countries has been attributed to the slow uptake of childhood vaccines at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. A report by the Tony Blair Institute shows the COVID-19 put some health systems under immense pressure and stretched others beyond their capacity. For instance, when lockdowns were imposed to slow the spread of the virus, parents and guardians were not able to take their children to hospitals for their routine vaccination schedules. According to the World Health Organization, almost 17,500 cases of measles were recorded in Africa between January and March this year, marking a 400% increase compared with the same period in 2021. The cases were from 20 African countries. Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa has hailed the new parliament building gifted by China. Okay, that bothers my mind, but hey, as a testimony of the strategic and comprehensive partnership. He was presenting his State of the Nation address at the opening of the 5th session of the 9th Parliament, held for the first time in the recently completed multi-million-dollar building. President Mnangagwa arrived at the new parliament in a Rolls-Royce to a gun salute, a fly past and a guard of honor. Much like the British colonial building, it replaces the impressive stone structure perched on a hill, is symbolic of deepening ties with China following strained relations with the West. Designed, funded and built with a grant worth more than $100 million, the entrance, flanked by corn towers mimicking those of the ancient Great Zimbabwe City, is fronted by a massive sheet of water symbolizing the Victoria Falls. Inside, cave paintings by the sun and indigenous people of Southern Africa adorn the House of Assembly's ceiling. Police in Malawi have arrested the stepson of former President Peter Mutharika as part of an investigation into the discovery of an unmarked mass grave in the northern Mzimba district last month. Malawi's authorities said the 30 bodies retrieved were likely of Ethiopian immigrants. Police have said the investigations led to the arrest of Tadikira Mafumza, as well as impounding a vehicle they suspected was used in transporting the dead man. A pathologist who is part of the team conducting autopsy on the bodies said partial results have been presented to the Malawi police and the full report will be submitted at the end of this month. A statue of a controversial German colonial officer in Namibia's capital, Windhoek, has been taken down following pressure from activist Kurt von Francois. A statue was erected in 1965 to celebrate him as the city's founder. Activists dismissed the claim as a lie and said he was a symbol of colonial oppression. Local artists performed rituals to reclaim the land where the statue stood before workers took it down. It is the latest statue to be removed in a worldwide campaign against symbols of the colonial era. 2 years ago, in neighboring South Africa, a statue of British imperialist Cyril Rhodes was decapitated. Von Francois was a senior military officer in what was then known as Southwest Africa between 1889 and 1894 during its time as a German colony. He was the commander of an operation in the 1890s to put down a rising rebellion by the Nama people, resulting in the killing of at least 80 people, mostly women and children. It later became known as the Massacre of Hoenkrans. Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari on Wednesday unveiled the redesigned Naira notes as proposed by the Central Bank of Nigeria. The launch and release of the banknotes came earlier than the December 15, 2022 date that had earlier been proposed. The unveiling marks the first time in 19 years that Nigeria is redesigning its currency with the replacement of the current 1,000 Naira note, 500 Naira note and 200 Naira note. At a briefing after the ceremony before the Federal Executive Council meeting in Abuja, the Central Bank of Nigeria Governor Mr. Godwin Emefiele debunked insinuations suggesting that the early unveiling of the new notes is meant to force some Nigerians, especially politicians who could be holding on to huge sums of cash, to release the money either to the banks or the economy, and also prevent them from bribing the electorate ahead of the coming general election and during the ongoing campaigns. Mr. Emefiele asked for those making these assertions to desist, adding that there is no need to perpetuate such information. The governor reported that there has been significant hoarding of banknotes, with statistics showing that over 85% of the money in circulation was outside the vaults of the commercial banks. Was not banked anywhere in Nigeria, over 85% of the money in circulation. So Comoros former President Ahmed Abdallah Sambi did not attend the second day of his high treason trial on Tuesday. Lawyers said there were no guarantees he would be judged fairly. Sambi, who is 64 years old, the main opponent to current President Azali Assoumani, is facing charges related to alleged sale of Comorian passports. And Jan Famon, another lawyer, added that Sambi, who appeared in frail health at the first hearing in the capital Moroni on Monday, would no longer attend the proceedings, which are expected to end this week. The defense team has argued that the president of the security court trying Sambi should recuse himself, having previously sat on the panel that decided to indict the former leader. But the request was denied, with the judge saying he had no knowledge of the merit of the case. The move by the Malian authorities to ban all organizations supported or financed by France has elicited mixed reactions. The ban has added upon the tensions that has existed between Mali and France following the withdrawal of all French forces from its territory. A number of Malians have supported the move, indicating that they will usher in a new beginning for self-defense without foreign interference. France's foreign minister had last week said they would maintain its humanitarian aid as well as financing for civil society organizations in Mali, a decision that now sits in limbo. The West Africa's nation's interim Prime Minister, Colonel Abdoulaye Maiga, justified the move in a statement on social media, calling it a response to France's recent halt to development aid for Mali. The French Foreign Ministry said last week it had made the decision, which came 3 months after finalizing its pullout of anti-jihadist forces from the country over Bamako's alleged use of paramilitaries from Russian group Wagner. Bamako denies this, acknowledging only the support of Russian military instructors. Maiga spoke in his statement of fanciful allegations and subterfuge intended to deceive and manipulate national and international public opinion for the purpose of destabilizing and isolating Mali. And still staying with the story in Mali, the German government said on Tuesday that it plans to wind down the country's participation in a UN military mission in Mali by the middle of 2024. Tensions have grown between Mali, its African neighbors, and the West after Mali's government allowed Russian mercenaries from Wagner Group to be deployed in its territory. Chancellor Olaf Scholz, spokesperson Stefan Haberstreit, had said in a brief statement that the government will propose to Parliament granting a final one-year extension to the mission in Mali in May, to allow this deployment to be phased out in a structured way after 10 years. The idea is to take account of elections in Mali that are expected in February 2024, he said. German military missions overseas require a mandate from Parliament, which is typically granted on an annual basis. The current mandate for Germany's participation in the UN mission, known as MINUSMA, allows for the deployment of up to 1,400 troops. Britain announced last week that it will withdraw its troops from the UN mission in Mali, saying that the West African countries' growing reliance on Russian mercenaries is undermining stability. Britain did not give a timeline for its withdrawal. France announced earlier this year it was withdrawing its own much larger force from Mali after relations deteriorated with the junta that seized power in 2020. France, the former colonial power in Mali, led a 9-year mission and had at its peak 5,500 troops in the country to combat Islamic militants. A few days after South Africa's top court ordered the release on parole of Janus Walus, the ruling continues to cause outrage. Groups of the late Chris Hani and political parties have slammed the decision. Walus has served over 2 decades of a life sentence for the murder in 1993 of Hani, an anti-apartheid leader. Polish-born Janus shot dead Chris Hani in the driveway of his home on April 10, 1993, in Bergsberg, a suburb east of Johannesburg. 51-year-old Hani was the General Secretary of the South African Communist Party and a Chief of Staff of Umkhonto. I'm sure there's a click somewhere there, but I can't do it. Wesizwe, the armed wing of the ruling African National Congress, ANC. In a 47-page long judgment, the Constitutional Court detailed how it came to rule in the application opposing Walus, the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, and others. Still, Hani's widow called the ruling diabolical, and Solly Mapaila, leader of the SACP, a political ally of the ruling ANC, said it was unjust. In a statement, the Communist Party said Hani's murder left a gaping wound in his family, the SACP, and the ranks of the working class. The judgment, they said, has rubbed salt granules to the wound. Very well. Sudanese health officials on Wednesday said at least 26 people have died from dengue fever in one of the worst outbreaks that the country has seen in recent years. Dengue fever is a mosquito-borne disease that occurs in tropical areas of the world, usually spread near stagnant sources of water. As of Monday, November 12th, 460 cases of the disease and a further 3,436 suspected cases had been recorded, the Sudanese Health Ministry announced on social media. Around 20 of the deaths were recorded in the southern Kordofan region, one of the areas where the outbreak was first reported by the Sudanese Doctors Committee in early November. Several local media outlets put the official number of cases at much higher figure. And then we end in South Sudan. The human rights watchdog Amnesty International has criticized the African Union for allegedly abandoning the establishment of a hybrid court for South Sudan. It says since August 2015, when parties to the conflict made a legally binding commitment to form the court, not much has been done to make it a reality. Amnesty International said 7 years later, the court does not exist, not even on paper. According to the revitalized peace agreement, a hybrid court, a commission for truth, reconciliation and healing, and reparations process should have been established more than 2 years ago. However, the parties to the agreement have consistently failed to meet deadlines to make critical reforms and establish transitional justice bodies without such a credible justification for the delays. In a research document released on Wednesday morning, the watchdog said South Sudan leaders have not adopted any legislation establishing the hybrid court as required by the peace agreement. The rights groups also say the government repeatedly took steps to block such establishment. Amnesty International said in June 2016 that Kiir and Machar published a joint op-ed in the New York Times entitled South Sudan Needs Truth, Not Trials, calling on the international community to reconsider the hybrid court for South Sudan. But in January 2021, the Council of Ministers approved a plan by the Ministry of Justice and Constitutional Affairs for the establishment of the court and other transitional justice institutions provided for in the revitalized peace agreement. And then, days later, the AU Commission's chairperson Moussa Faki welcomed the approval, noting that it could end the delay in establishing the hybrid court and other institutions relevant to bring justice and healing to all South Sudanese. However, Amnesty International now says the failure to establish the body reflects a lack of political will to hold those most responsible for serious crimes, which are likely to include senior political and military officials, to account. It said the African Union has taken some limited steps towards the creation of the hybrid court in South Sudan. And you know, this is a story I'd really love to talk about, but I think I'll talk about it later by itself, because there's a lot to unpack in that. as far as that revitalized peace agreement, and the reason why it was thought to be important for this hybrid court to be, formed there in South Sudan. So I will just gloss over that and just look at. By the way, you're up to date. That marks the end of our bulletin this morning. So let us just take a look at. All right, Somali is back at it again. Was it on Monday that I was telling you that it has banned all NGOs from France or that are supported by any French anything. Mali banned these NGOs from operating in the country. And there were this news was, I guess, a welcome move to a section of Malians there. And they're supporting the ban of all these organizations because, France withdrew its military support. The forces that had been there, that I think had amounted to about 5,500, forces that has been there trying to help Mali and other countries in the Sahel region. I think France helped in putting together the G5 of the Sahel region. 5 countries that have been mostly affected by the jihadist extremism activities in that region. And so Mali pulled out of this G5, by the way, that left a gaping, that left a huge gap as far as the concerted effort and the fight against extremism in that region is concerned. And so it has been a very tumultuous relationship between France and Mali. And this was made worse by Mali's decision to welcome the Wagner Group, who are considered Russian mercenaries from Russia, to come and help in the security matters in the country. And I think Mali did this, the new junta, not the president that was there, Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta. Remember, he was the Malian president. He was ousted in 2020. He died this year in January. He passed on. So after the junta came to power, led by Maïga, Colonel Maïga, he's the transitional president right now in Mali. So the relationship between France and Mali has significantly, been affected because after the ousting of Boubacar Keïta, France was insisting for a civilian, leadership for a quick transition. And the military junta was saying, no, we still have, in fact, I think what they said at that time, we need, they did suspend the constitution and they said they want to start rebuilding this country or something like that from its foundations. And I think a couple of years later, I'm still waiting to see what exactly that meant because nothing much has changed, as much as things have changed, but a lot still remains the same in Mali. So that was the contention. France was pushing for an almost immediate transition so that the country could go back into having a civilian, leader. But that was not the case, as the military junta had a different perspective or had a different feeling of how things should be done and how that transition should take place. So that was the bone of contention and the point of departure that worsened, the relationship between France and Mali. But even before that, there had been some undertone of some disquiet as far as France's troops and France's presence in Mali was concerned. Remember, there's a time I was talking to you about this conflict in Mali and the genesis of it and the Tuaregs in parts of the country, and they came back from Algeria after the war in Algeria and after the fighting in Libya and the ousting of Muammar Gaddafi. Used to use them, to fight his whatever. So they came back to Mali and they regrouped there and they started, fighting the government and things like that. And because I think that part of the country felt, the northern part of the country felt left out. And the southern part of the country, who consider themselves the elites, felt that the northerners, who includes Tuaregs and other groups, were a menace. I will not get into the nitty-gritties and the details of that. You can look for that show. I think we have it on the videos is up there. You can look for it. So they started fighting, and one of the motivating factors, I think they wanted to create their own country up there. They even had a name for it crafted. So this has been a consistent. And then France came in. Before Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, there was another president. And I think before that, there was another ousting of another president in a coup. Several coups have happened in Mali. So the ousting of Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta was not really a surprise. So France stepped in by the request of the then presidency to come and help in fighting this jihadist that was fomenting from the north of the country, right? But it after years of that, and nothing really was changing much. Okay, fine. France helped in fighting and backing of, I think there's a city that in Timbuktu, thereabout, that these Tuaregs had captured, and France, through France's help, they were able to repel them back, and so Mali was able to recapture that city in Timbuktu, and that changed, you know. So instead of France perhaps being very clear on their mission, on what they wanted to do and the help that they wanted to give the Malian government at that time, and then go back to France or scale down on their troops, what France then ended up to do is add more troops and continue, you know, significantly, you know, placing its presence was now being felt. And so Malians started to feel as though France had overstayed its welcome there in Mali. So now even for the citizens who were grateful for France's help in fighting these jihadists and recapturing some of the towns and cities that they had captured, they started having some disquietness and discomfort, and they felt as if now France was up here trying to take over the running of the country. So it's a long history. So anyway, fast forward, by when the military junta ousted the president, Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, in 2020, like I said, France was not very happy, and France wanted a quick transition to civilian rule because, you know, hardly can you, you know, maybe try to manage the military in a country. But that was not the case. The junta said we needed 2 years of transition, and then after that they changed. No, they said they needed, I think, 1 year, then 2 years, then now I don't know how much time they need. I think they changed that to 2 years. Time to transit and restructure. That's what they had said, yes, restructuring the foundations of Mali. And I've said, I've been waiting to see how this restructuring is going on. I've not been receiving any updates. So nothing much is really happening because the jihadism is still there. It's very much present, and I think every once in a while there are news of attacks, and it has intensified, and even to some extent the military junta is now accusing France of supporting some of these activities now. So look at that. It's a proxy war that we see play out in Europe now coming down here in Mali because of the presence of the Russian mercenaries from the Wagner group there in Mali that really caused discontent between these Western powers from the European Union that were helping you know, Mali fight these jihadist activities. So now France pulled out its troops from Mali, and that did not go down well with the Malian authorities, you know, and they said, okay, fine. So if you've withdrawn all your forces, so now we don't. And then after France withdrawing its forces, its foreign minister last week just recently said that it would maintain its humanitarian aid as well as financing of civil society organizations. So if you have withdrawn your military support and you have severed some other ties with Mali, why would you still want to be funding civil society organization in Mali? So I do understand why the Malian authorities now went ahead and gave a ban to the civil society organizations being financed from France. Because we know in so many cases, especially in Africa, these civil societies are normally used by these external forces to run their agenda in countries. So if you're not very careful, they have, you know, they come in disguise. And I think, was it yesterday that you were talking about the philanthropic, is it philanthropic capitalism. So they come in under the disguise of we are supporting your healthcare, we are supporting your education system, we are trying to strengthen your institutions, we want to hold the government in check and the civil society. So they place themselves and they try to endear themselves to the people especially. So in international relations, this we call soft power. Soft power. So you try to endear yourself to the people, and so the people love you. If you're bringing me clean water in some village down there in Timbuktu, and you're building school and you're building healthcare systems, why would I not love you? And yet there I'm feeling as if the government, and the head of, and the government that I'm in that country does not seem to be taking care of me as a citizen, and now you come in as this wonderful civil society, organization to ensure that I get all these things. So they normally use this as a means to change the hearts of the people, and they use it to against the government. So people start being disquiet, and they start looking at their government in a different manner. If the hard power can't work, then we are going to employ soft power. And we've seen this especially across Africa playing very well, these Western powers sponsoring these civil societies and this humanitarian aid. And they use it, of course, to advance their own agenda. It is part of their foreign policy. So countries have to be very careful. So France, by withdrawing its troops, what business does it have again now wanting to finance civil society organizations in Mali? What interest does it have, as far as financing humanitarian aid in that country is concerned? Does it make its contribution go to the United Nations? I'm sure there's a body, World Food Program can deliver that aid there. World Health Organization can bring in drugs, through that. So I do understand Mali's position as far as refusing to cooperate with these organizations that are being sponsored by France that operate in that country, because if you have decided to leave, our relationship is not fine, and this marriage is severed, why do you still want to linger around? Why do you still want to put your proxies in place to bring trouble? Because that's what they do, a lot of these civil societies. And I think countries that have a strong civil society is good. And there are civil society that are able to do, of course, they normally have their own agenda that they want to drive, or their own, their own things that they want to do as far as holding governments accountable is concerned. And we know a society that has a strong civil society organizations, it is, usually it's good. It's in democratic spaces. It's very important to have a strong civil society, in the country. It's important to have a civil freedoms that the media can even enjoy, because this acts as safeguard to protect constitution. So a country that has a strong civil society, a strong media, usually you will find that the democracy there is thriving, or is quite robust. And so it's very important. I'm not discrediting at all the position of civil societies as far as democracies across the world is concerned. But what I'm saying is, when you have these civil society organizations that are being used as proxies by different governments, especially from the Western world, and they use these civil societies to even turn the people against the government and to run the foreign to run the agenda of the countries that they're coming from in Africa, and then that's when we should have a problem with that. So I do understand why Mali government is uncomfortable with any form of humanitarian aid, as well as the financing by civil society organizations by France inside the country, because France has, I think, even the ambassador, I think, left. Mali had given an ultimatum several weeks ago. I think he left. So they don't have a good relationship. So they might want to work on that first before Mali can be comfortable with having anything that has to do with even civil society organizations from being sponsored by the friends that benefit the people, but a lot of these civil societies, especially that are sponsored by Western powers, we must look out for them. They don't have the best of intentions. So another country that also has said that it will scale down and withdraw its troops from Mali is Germany. But now, when you look at how how Germany is, the strategy and the approach Germany is taking, and that of France, you'll see that Germany has really no vested interest in Mali. And that is because of how they've even planned how to move out of Mali. You can see they've given considerations to very important things. For instance, the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz announced on Tuesday through his spokesperson that they're planning to end the mission in Mali in May to allow this deployment, but it will be phased out in a structured way after 10 years. So they'll not just up and leave, they'll structure it in a way that Mali will be able to adjust itself through the gap that will be left by these troops leaving the country. And the idea is to take account of elections in Mali that are expected in February 2024. So they're saying, because Mali, so the junta decided elections will take place in February 2024. I can almost guarantee the elections will not take place, but that is the word they gave to ECOWAS. So we maybe just go along with that, because they've postponed a couple of times, and that is what even saw the fallout with France. They're not very keen on having an election and having transiting to a civilian rule in the country. So they have scheduled the elections to February 2024. So Germany is saying, we will offer, as Mali prepares and readies itself for these elections in 2024 in February, so we will be in the country and we will make sure that our phasing out of our troops will be in a way that will not injure or will not jeopardize the already bad security apparatus in Mali. So the elections are expected in February 2024. So Germany has said that it will have the last of its troops leave in May 2024, just after the elections have happened in February 2024. So they're giving the Mali government enough time to prepare for these elections and to have these elections, and then 3 months later, hopefully after they've announced the winner and the country has settled and transited, and now the German, the German troops can leave the country. So you can see they've put some thought even in them leaving and their troops are leaving Mali. So you can see there's no vested interest there, unlike that of what we see with France, and also for obvious reason. France was the former colony, so France, anyway, let's just leave that Mali story alone. Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari yesterday unveiled the redesigned Naira notes as proposed by the Central Bank of Nigeria. The last time we were talking about this story, they had announced that, the launch date will be on 15th, but shock on those who had hoarded money in their homes. It came a few days early. Christmas has arrived a few days early. Thanksgiving. Today is Thanksgiving in the US. They're celebrating that. So they caught them flat-footed, because I think for those who have hoarded, 85% of the money in circulation in Nigeria is not banked anywhere in any financial institution. So you can imagine 85%, that's a lot of money that is unaccounted for. That is a very ripe situation for money laundering. Now you wonder why Nigeria is known so much as far as money laundering is concerned, and a lot of countries have put a red alert over Nigerians, and especially if they travel abroad and if they're engaging in financial activities, there's usually someone watching and seeing what are they doing. Because if you have back in the country, over 85% of their currency cannot really be traced through the formal financial institutions. So what are we saying here? So the government decided to cap this, and knowing that elections are coming up next year, so I'm sure a lot of these politicians are the great holders So they have these monies for campaigns because a lot of bribing and all that happens. And elections in Africa is an expensive affair anyway. The campaigns are exorbitantly, expensive for no reason at all. And then, so now President Buhari launched the new currency yesterday, the new notes yesterday. So those who have hoarded the monies, you better take it back. I don't know how you're going to take it back, because with that, they've also put some measures in place that you might have to do some explanation. When you carry your money with the bags and take it to the bank, you might want to explain what had happened. I don't know how much time they have for people to change and start using this new currency, but I think it will be interesting to see how this will play out, especially during this period. It is seen as if this is targeting politicians, as we know that I've said Nigeria is going to its elections next year in February. And so the timing, I think, is the timing. It is the timing for me. It is the timing. Why now? Why now? So the politicians must be having, sleepless nights. And other people who refuse to take their money to the banks. So I don't know when they do have the time to go and exchange the monies with these new notes. And then when you exchange, you can't be given the same amount to go back home with. Then you have to put it in the bank. So now it will be under scrutiny. This will be nice to see how this will play out. So Buhari launched this yesterday, the new redesigned, notes there. Okay, so let's look at this other story. I will not look at the deer crisis, because we shall be coming back on top of the hour to look at it in detail, so I'll just gloss over it as well. But I'd like for me to look at, to look at this story yesterday. Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa opened a new parliament that was gifted. The building was a gift from China to Zimbabwe, and he said that this gift by China is a testimony of the strategic and comprehensive partnership that Zimbabwe has with China. All right. He was presenting his State of the Nation address at the opening of the 5th session of the 9th Parliament, held for the first time in the recently completed multi-million-dollar building. President Mnangagwa arrived at the new parliament in a Rolls-Royce. Yeah, a country that is struggling, that can't even build its own parliament. The president arrives in luxury, right? To a gun salute, a fly past, and a guard of honor. Much like the British colonial building it replaces, the impressive stone structure perched on a hill is a symbolic of deepening ties with China. Now, I have a problem, and I know maybe I'm not the one to talk, because we've seen a lot of things that China is doing here in Kenya, but a lot of it has to do with the development agenda. We've seen China has heavily invested in the infrastructure here in Kenya, which I think it's a good thing. We owe them a lot. I guess the country will make up a plan on how we have to clear this debt with China, and we've had a good working relationship, especially during President Uhuru Kenyatta's time. But also I do see the new administration under William Ruto. President William Ruto is also warming up to China now. They're sort of changing tune, because Kenya is a very strategic partner, and there has been a lot of push and pull as far as the interest of West and East is concerned, and we see how sometimes that plays out in the country. So anyway, but China building a parliament, this is where I don't understand. Parliament is at the core of democracy in a country. That is where laws are made. That is where, the people get their representation. It's a very important institution. Why would China come and gift Zimbabwe with a parliament? It's nice, but China, you would have built some roads. You would have put up some hospitals. You would have supplied the hospitals with medicine, because we know Zimbabweans a lot of times must cross to other countries like South Africa and the neighboring countries because they can't get proper health care in their country. So why would you build a parliament for Zimbabwe? I think this is a bigger scheme. We know China has been making inroads in the country, and China has been trying to cement its position and in this continent, not country, in the continent. And we've seen how much it is being involved in a lot of activities in the continent. But building a parliament, a country that does not even believe in democracy, is coming to build a parliament in Zimbabwe. A country that does not even believe in certain freedoms is coming to build a parliament. That is the core of the democratic practices in Zimbabwe and in any country. Parliament is a very important institution. And for Zimbabwe to have accepted that, because I think that now, I believe there will be some good level of influence, over what will be happening in that parliament. So that gives me a bit of jitters. China does not even have a parliament. It normally meets in this great hall of the people, something like that. Every certain number of years, they decide what they decide. They don't believe in democracy. They have a whole different, governing system that is working for them. It's fine. But I think I am having trouble wrapping my mind around this and why China particularly chose to give to Zimbabwe this gift. Because the parliament that Zimbabwe was using was one that was built by the British. So this is just power play at its best. This is just power play at its best. And we know diplomacy is all about power play. Power struggles. At the end of it all, that is what it's about. So this is quite symbolic as far as China's influence that continues to grow here in the continent is concerned, and it's much bigger than just a gift in the name of parliament to Zimbabwe. There's a whole lot in that, and the symbolism in that is quite, it's quite something. It's something that we cannot take lightly. So maybe I'll be looking to see the quality of debates that will be coming from this parliament, this wonderful gift, from Zimbabwe. Okay, so anyway, yeah. It's very interesting. And then you wonder why our system of governance are compromised when we can't even, we had our own, but we renovated our parliament here in Kenya a couple of years ago. We renovated it because the way it was built, it was no longer serving very well the purpose. There were increased number of legislators and things like that. So we needed a new facelift, and I think we renovated ours here in Kenya a couple of years ago. And I want to believe the government sponsored that. I will be sad to know that. It will be sad to know that another country came and sponsored the refurbishing of our parliament. That is the center of our democracy. There are things that should be sacred to a country that we get to guard, and we get to do it by ourselves, on our own, without having any other external help or influence. And I strongly believe even our elections in this continent, it has to come to a point where that is something that we get to do by ourselves. Because the minute you allow any external influence and voice into certain aspects of how you run your country, that is when you get yourself into a trouble. Because now you can't tell them to shut up. They're funding you. They're funding very important things in the country, and you lose your legitimacy, and your voice. And you out here telling us how you're independent and how you were a sovereign state. A sovereign state, and you're having another country come and gift you with a parliament. Get out of here with that. That is unfortunate. There are things we must guard in this continent. There are things that we must do for ourselves. And that's why you see AU, we complain here about that all the time. AU cannot do much. AU's hands are tied because a lot of money that is being used in the AU, the funding in the AU, we don't do it by ourselves. It comes from outside. So when it comes from the outside, He who pays the piper gets to choose what kind of music they want the piper to play for them to dance. We don't have a say. We give away our right to express ourselves and to run our own affairs. So this has to change. They can come in and build roads. They can come and build hospitals. They can bring food aid if it's necessary. There are other things they can do in a country. There are other things they would have invested in. They would have gifted the people of Zimbabwe. But a parliament, that is something else. And the president stood there and open, and he was happy, and he was saying how this goes to show how this relationship is just wonderful. Thank you. This has been Good Morning Africa. I'll see you in a short bit, and we shall be looking at the latest as far as the Democratic Republic of Congo's conflict is concerned. My name is Miriam Ogoto. This has been Good Morning Africa. Good morning.